Marcus Chen stepped out of the black taxi and looked up at the tall iron gates of Buckingham Palace. The summer sun was bright in London and tourists were everywhere. Marcus wore his best clothes today. He had on expensive jeans, white sneakers, and a black jacket. Under his jacket, he wore a t-shirt that said "Champion Fighter" in big gold letters. Marcus was 28 years old and very proud of himself. 3 weeks ago, he had won a big martial arts contest in his home city of Manchester. He was a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. The trophy sat on his kitchen table at home. Every morning, Marcus looked at it while drinking his coffee. It made him feel strong and important. "Come on, Marcus. The tour starts in 10 minutes, called his friend Danny. Danny was shorter than Marcus and had red hair. He worked at the same office as Marcus. Next to Danny stood 2 other friends, Mike and James. They all worked together and had decided to take a weekend trip to London. Marcus walked slowly toward his friends. He moved like he was in a movie. His back was straight and his head was high. Other tourists looked at him as he passed. Marcus liked this attention. He thought people could see that he was special. He thought they knew he was a fighter. "Did you see that family staring at me?" Marcus asked his friends with a big smile. "They can probably tell I'm a martial artist. It's the way I walk and stand." "You can't hide real training." Danny rolled his eyes. "Marcus, they were probably just wondering why you're walking so slowly. We're going to miss the tour." But Marcus didn't listen. For the past 3 weeks since winning his trophy, Marcus thought he was the best fighter in the world. He had beaten 15 other fighters in the contest. The local newspaper had written a small story about him. His martial arts teacher had shaken his hand and called him very skilled. All of this had gone to Marcus's head. He started to believe he could beat anyone in a fight. He watched action movies and thought he was like the heroes. He looked in the mirror every morning and flexed his muscles. He told everyone at work about his fighting skills. The 4 friends joined a group of about 30 tourists near the palace gates. Their tour guide was a woman named Sarah. She had blonde hair and wore a red coat. She carried a small flag so the group could follow her. "Welcome to Buckingham Palace," Sarah said in a loud, clear voice. "This is where the king lives when he is in London. The palace has 775 rooms. We will walk around the outside today and learn about the history and the guards." Marcus wasn't really listening to Sarah. He was looking at the palace and thinking about how important he felt. He imagined what it would be like to live in such a big place. He thought about how the king probably had bodyguards. But Marcus was sure he could protect himself better than any bodyguard. As the group started walking, Marcus noticed something that made his heart beat faster. Near the palace entrance, he could see guards standing very still. They wore bright red jackets and tall black hats made of fur. These were the famous royal guards that Marcus had seen in movies and pictures. "Look at those guys," Marcus said to his friends, pointing at the guards. "They just stand there all day. That must be the easiest job in the world." Mike looked where Marcus was pointing. "I think they're supposed to be very well trained." "They're soldiers, not just guards." Marcus laughed loudly. "Soldiers? They look like toys to me. Look at those funny hats and red clothes. They're just for show. They probably don't know anything about real fighting." James tried to change the subject. "The palace is really beautiful. Look at all those windows." But Marcus wasn't interested in the palace anymore. He was watching the guards and thinking about fighting. In his mind, he started to imagine what would happen if he fought one of them. He pictured himself using his Taekwondo kicks to win easily. He thought about how impressed everyone would be. Sarah led the group closer to the guards. She started talking about their history and training. "The Queen's Guard have been protecting the royal family for hundreds of years," she explained. "These men are highly trained soldiers. Many of them have served in wars around the world. They must stand perfectly still for 2 hours at a time." Marcus snorted. "Highly trained? At what, standing still? I bet none of them could last 1 minute in a real fight with someone who knows martial arts." His voice was getting louder. Other tourists started to look at him. Some moved away from the group. Danny grabbed Marcus's arm. "Keep your voice down. You're embarrassing us," but Marcus felt excited. He had been thinking about his fighting skills every day since winning his trophy. He wanted to prove himself again. He wanted more people to see how strong and skilled he was. Looking at these guards in their bright uniforms, Marcus started to get an idea. A dangerous idea. "I'm serious," Marcus continued, speaking even louder now. "These guards are just for decoration. They're like the changing of the guard ceremony. It's all just a show for tourists. Put any of them in a ring with me and I'll show you what real fighting looks like." The tour guide Sarah heard Marcus talking. She turned around with a worried look on her face. "Sir, please keep your voice down. The guards are doing their job and we need to respect them." Marcus felt angry that someone was telling him what to do. Respect them for what? Standing around in costume. "I have a black belt. I've won competitions. I've trained for 15 years. These guys probably learned to march in a straight line and that's it." More tourists were staring now. Some were taking pictures with their phones. Marcus noticed this and felt even more excited. He thought they were taking pictures because they were impressed with what he was saying. He didn't realize they thought he was acting strange and rude. One of the guards was standing about 20 feet away. He was tall and had broad shoulders. His red jacket was perfectly clean and pressed. His black hat sat straight on his head. His face showed no emotion at all. He stared straight ahead and didn't move a single muscle. Marcus stared at this guard and felt a wave of confidence. The guard looked young, maybe in his 20s. Marcus thought he looked soft and weak under his fancy uniform. Marcus started to walk toward the guard, his mind racing with thoughts of proving his fighting skills to everyone watching. Marcus walked closer to the guard, feeling more confident with each step. His 3 friends followed behind him, looking worried. Danny kept trying to grab Marcus's arm, but Marcus pulled away each time. "Marcus, what are you doing?" Danny whispered. "Come back to the group." But Marcus didn't listen. He was focused on the guard standing perfectly still near the palace entrance. The guard was about 6 feet tall with light brown hair showing under his black fur hat. His red jacket had shiny gold buttons and his black boots were polished until they sparkled in the sunlight. Marcus stopped about 5 feet away from the guard and crossed his arms. He looked the guard up and down like he was examining a statue in a museum. The guard's name tag said Morrison. His face was young but serious. He stared straight ahead and didn't look at Marcus at all. "Hello there, toy soldier," Marcus said in a loud voice. "Nice costume you're wearing. Did you get it from a theater shop?" The guard didn't move or speak. He kept staring straight ahead like Marcus wasn't even there. This made Marcus feel angry and confused. He was used to people paying attention to him, especially since he won his trophy. More tourists started gathering around to watch. Some of them looked shocked at Marcus's behavior. Others took out their phones to record what was happening. Marcus saw the phones and felt excited. He thought this was his chance to become famous by showing everyone his fighting skills. "I'm talking to you," Marcus said, stepping even closer. "Don't you know it's rude to ignore people? Or maybe you can't hear me with that big fuzzy hat on your head." Sarah, the tour guide, hurried over with a worried expression. "Sir, please step back. You cannot disturb the guards. They are on duty." Marcus turned to face her with an angry look. "Disturb him? I'm just having a conversation." But I guess he's too scared to talk back. These guards are all just for show, aren't they? They probably couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. Sarah's face turned red. "Sir, I must ask you to return to the group immediately. The guards are highly trained soldiers. You are being very disrespectful." Marcus laughed loudly. "Highly trained at what? Standing still and looking pretty? Watch this." He turned back to the guard and started doing martial arts moves right in front of him. Marcus began with some basic taekwondo kicks, keeping his movements slow and controlled. He lifted his right leg high in the air and held it there for a few seconds. Then he did a spinning kick, turning his whole body around. The crowd of tourists grew larger as more people stopped to watch. "See that?" Marcus called out to the watching crowd. 15 years of training. 3 black belt degrees. That's what real fighting looks like. He did another kick, this time higher than before. The guard named Morrison still didn't move. His eyes stayed focused straight ahead. His hands remained at his sides. He didn't even blink when Marcus's foot came close to his face. This perfect stillness made Marcus even more angry. "What's wrong with you?" Marcus shouted. "Are you even alive in there? Or are you just a very realistic statue?" He started doing more aggressive moves, punching the air near the guard's head. Danny tried one more time to stop his friend. "Marcus, please. You're going to get in trouble. Let's just go back to the hotel." But Marcus was in his own world now. He had been dreaming about moments like this ever since he won his trophy. In his imagination, he was always the hero who impressed everyone with his amazing fighting skills. He thought this was his chance to prove that he was better than everyone else. Marcus started telling the crowd about his martial arts background. "I started training when I was 13 years old," he announced while doing slow punches in the air. I've won dozens of competitions. Last month, I beat 15 fighters in one day to win the regional championship. Some tourists looked impressed, but many looked uncomfortable. A few parents pulled their children away from the scene. An elderly woman shook her head and walked away, muttering something about young people these days. Marcus didn't notice the negative reactions. He only saw the people who were watching and recording. He felt like a movie star performing for his fans. He decided to make his performance even more dramatic. This guard probably learned to march and salute, and that's about it, Marcus continued. I bet he's never been in a real fight in his life. Look at him just standing there like a robot. He probably doesn't even know how to throw a proper punch. Marcus moved even closer to the guard. He was now less than 2 feet away. He could see the guard's face clearly now. Morrison looked young, maybe 25 years old. He had blue eyes and a small scar above his left eyebrow. His skin was tan like he spent time outdoors. Hey, pretty boy, Marcus said directly to Morrison's face. I'm talking to you. Don't you have anything to say? Or are you too scared to speak up? Marcus started shadowboxing right in front of the guard. He threw punches that stopped just inches from Morrison's face. He wanted to see if he could make the guard flinch or step back. But Morrison remained perfectly still like he was made of stone. This perfect calmness made Marcus furious. He was used to getting reactions from people. When he practiced at his martial arts school, his opponents always showed fear or respect. But this guard acted like Marcus didn't exist at all. Fine, if you won't talk, maybe you'll react to this, Marcus said. He started doing kicks that came very close to the guard's body. He kicked toward Morrison's leg, stopping just before making contact. Then he did a high kick that passed just inches from the guard's head. The crowd was getting bigger and more excited. Some people cheered when Marcus did impressive moves. Others looked worried and uncomfortable. Security cameras mounted on nearby walls recorded everything that was happening. Marcus felt drunk on the attention. He had never had so many people watching him before. He decided to make his moves even flashier and more dangerous. He began doing spinning kicks and jumping techniques that he had learned in advanced classes. This is what 15 years of training looks like, Marcus shouted to the crowd. This is the difference between a real fighter and a toy soldier. But as Marcus continued his show, he didn't notice something important. Deep in Morrison's blue eyes, something was changing. The guard's breathing remained steady, and his face showed no emotion. But behind his calm exterior, Morrison was watching every move Marcus made. He was measuring distances and calculating angles. Morrison had seen many troublemakers during his time as a guard. Most of them were just drunk tourists who wanted to take funny pictures. They usually got bored and walked away after a few minutes. But Marcus was different. He was getting more aggressive and more dangerous with each passing minute. Marcus threw a punch that came within an inch of Morrison's nose. Then he did a kick that barely missed the guard's uniform. The crowd gasped at how close the moves were getting. Scared yet? Marcus taunted. Still nothing to say? I guess you really are just a decoration. What Marcus didn't know was that Morrison was a 10-year veteran of the British Army. He had served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan. He had been in real combat situations where people were shooting real bullets and throwing real bombs. He had been trained in close-quarters combat by some of the best instructors in the world. Morrison also didn't know that his calm behavior was making Marcus more and more angry. In Marcus's mind, the guard's silence meant fear and weakness. Marcus thought he was winning some kind of contest. He decided it was time to take things to the next level. Marcus stepped back and looked at the crowd that had gathered around him. At least 50 people were watching now. Some held phones up to record everything. Others whispered to each other and pointed at Marcus. A few children sat on their parents' shoulders to get a better view. Marcus felt like he was on stage performing for an audience. His heart was beating fast with excitement. He had never had so many people pay attention to him at the same time. Even when he won his trophy, only about 20 people had been watching in the martial arts competition. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced to the crowd like he was a circus performer, you are about to see the difference between real fighting skills and fake military training. He turned back to face Morrison, the guard. Morrison still stood perfectly still in his bright red jacket and tall black hat. His blue eyes looked straight ahead. His hands stayed at his sides. He hadn't moved a single muscle in the past 10 minutes. Marcus felt frustrated by the guard's calmness. In all his years of martial arts training, he had never met someone who could ignore him completely. Usually when Marcus showed off his fighting skills, people either looked impressed or scared. But this guard acted like Marcus was invisible. "I've been doing martial arts for 15 years, Marcus said loudly, making sure everyone in the crowd could hear him. "I have a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. 3 weeks ago I won the regional championship in Manchester. I beat 15 other fighters in one day." Marcus started doing more complicated kicks to show off his flexibility. He lifted his leg straight up above his head and held it there. Then he did a spinning kick that made his jacket fly out around him. Some people in the crowd clapped and cheered. "This guard has probably never been in a real fight in his entire life," Marcus continued. "Look at him standing there like a statue. He's probably thinking about what to have for lunch instead of paying attention to a real fighter standing right in front of him." Marcus moved closer to Morrison until they were face to face. He could smell the guard's cologne and see the small details of his uniform. The red jacket had perfect stitching and shiny brass buttons. The black boots reflected the sunlight like mirrors. "Hey, Sleeping Beauty," Marcus said directly into Morrison's face. "Wake up, there's a black belt martial artist standing right here. Don't you want to know what that means?" Morrison continued staring straight ahead. His breathing stayed calm and steady. His face showed no emotion at all. To Marcus, this looked like fear or stupidity. He didn't understand that Morrison was actually showing incredible self-control and discipline. Marcus decided to try a different approach. He started walking in a circle around Morrison, talking the whole time. "You know what I think?" Marcus said. "I think you're scared. I think you know that if we had a real fight, you wouldn't last 10 seconds against someone with my training." The crowd followed Marcus with their eyes as he circled the guard. Some people looked uncomfortable with how aggressive Marcus was becoming. A few families started walking away, but many tourists stayed to watch, curious about what would happen next. "I train 6 days a week," Marcus continued. "I can break wooden boards with my bare hands. I can kick higher than your head. I've studied fighting techniques from Korea, Japan, and China. What have you studied?" "How to stand still and look pretty." Marcus stopped in front of Morrison again. He was breathing harder now from excitement and anger. His face was getting red. Sweat was starting to form on his forehead even though the weather wasn't very hot. Sarah, the tour guide, tried one more time to stop the situation. "Sir, I'm calling security if you don't return to the group right now. You are disturbing the peace and being disrespectful to a member of the Queen's Guard." Marcus turned to face her with anger in his eyes. "Disrespectful? I'm showing respect for real fighting skills. This guy is a joke. He's a tourist attraction, not a real soldier." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a picture of his trophy. "See this? This is what real achievement looks like. This is what you get when you have actual skills instead of just standing around in a costume all day." Some people in the crowd moved closer to see the trophy on Marcus's phone. A few made impressed noises. This attention made Marcus feel even more confident and excited. "I challenge this guard to a fighting contest," Marcus announced loudly to the entire crowd. "Right here, right now. Let's see if his military training can stand up to real martial arts skills." The crowd started murmuring and talking among themselves. Some people looked shocked that Marcus would challenge a royal guard. Others seemed excited about the possibility of seeing a real fight. Morrison still didn't react to the challenge. He continued staring straight ahead with his blue eyes focused on some distant point. His hands remained at his sides. His breathing stayed calm and controlled. Marcus felt insulted by the guard's lack of response. "Did you hear me?" he shouted. "I'm challenging you to a fight. Are you too scared to accept? Or are you not allowed to fight because you might get your pretty uniform dirty?" Marcus started doing more aggressive martial arts moves. He threw punches that stopped just half an inch from Morrison's face. He did kicks that came so close to the guard's body that they moved the fabric of his red jacket slightly. "Come on," Marcus yelled. "Show me what you've got. Let's see this famous military training everyone talks about. I bet you don't even know how to throw a proper punch." The crowd was getting more excited and more worried at the same time. Some people started taking videos with their phones, thinking they might see something amazing. Others looked around for security guards or police officers. Marcus was now completely focused on Morrison. He had forgotten about his friends, the tour group, and even most of the watching crowd. All he could think about was proving that he was a better fighter than this silent guard. "You know what I think?" Marcus said, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. "I think you're not even a real soldier. I think you're just an actor dressed up in a costume. Real soldiers would never just stand there and take this kind of challenge." Marcus moved even closer to Morrison. Now they were so close that Marcus could feel the guard's breath. He looked directly into Morrison's blue eyes, trying to see some sign of fear or anger, but Morrison's eyes remained calm and steady. "Last chance," Marcus said in a threatening voice. "Either accept my challenge like a man, or admit that you're just a fake soldier playing dress-up for tourists." Marcus raised his hand and held it inches from Morrison's face. "I'm going to count to 3. If you don't respond, I'm going to assume you're admitting that I'm the better fighter." The crowd held its breath. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. Marcus started counting loudly. 1. Morrison didn't move. 2. Morrison remained perfectly still. 3. Marcus felt a surge of victory. In his mind, the guard's silence meant that he had won the challenge. Marcus thought Morrison was too scared or too weak to fight back, but Marcus had made a terrible mistake. He had completely misunderstood what he was dealing with. Morrison wasn't silent because he was scared. He was silent because he was disciplined, trained, and professional. Marcus decided to take one final step that would change everything. He reached out his hand and lightly touched Morrison's red jacket, just above the heart. It was barely a touch, more like a gentle tap. But it was enough. In that moment, Marcus had crossed a line that he didn't even know existed. The moment Marcus's finger touched Morrison's red jacket, everything changed. It was like someone had flipped a switch inside the guard. After standing perfectly still for over 10 minutes, Morrison suddenly came to life. What happened next was so fast that most people in the crowd didn't even see it clearly. 1 second, Marcus was standing confidently in front of the guard with his hand on the red jacket. The next second, Marcus was flying through the air like he had been shot from a cannon. Morrison moved with speed and skill that seemed almost impossible. His years of military training and real combat experience took control of his body. Without thinking, he grabbed Marcus's outstretched arm with both hands. At the same time, he stepped forward and turned his hip into Marcus's body. The technique Morrison used was called a hip throw. It was something he had learned in close-quarters combat training and used in real fighting situations in Afghanistan. It was designed to quickly disable an enemy who got too close. Morrison pulled down on Marcus's arm while lifting with his hip. He used Marcus's own body weight against him. In less than 1 second, Marcus went from standing on the ground to flying through the air in a perfect arc. The crowd gasped as they watched Marcus sail over Morrison's shoulder. Marcus's face showed complete shock and confusion. His mouth was open and his eyes were wide. He looked like someone who had just realized he was falling off a cliff. Marcus's expensive jacket flapped in the air as he spun around. His arms and legs moved wildly as he tried to understand what was happening to him. The trophy that he was so proud of seemed very far away and unimportant now. Morrison didn't just throw Marcus. As Marcus began to fall, Morrison swept his own leg backward. His boot caught Marcus's ankles and pulled his feet out from under him. This made sure that Marcus would land hard and wouldn't be able to catch himself. The entire movement from Morrison was smooth and controlled. It looked like a dance that he had practiced thousands of times. His red jacket didn't even wrinkle. His tall black hat stayed perfectly straight on his head. His face remained calm and emotionless. Marcus hit the pavement with a sound that made everyone in the crowd wince. It was the sound of 180 pounds of overconfident martial artist meeting hard stone at high speed. Marcus landed flat on his back with his arms spread out to his sides. The impact knocked all the air out of Marcus's lungs. For a few seconds, he couldn't breathe at all. He laid on the ground with his mouth open, trying to suck in air but unable to make his lungs work. His face turned red, then purple. Morrison immediately returned to his original position. He stood perfectly straight with his hands at his sides. His eyes focused on the same distant point they had been watching before. His breathing remained calm and steady. It was as if the entire incident had never happened. The crowd stood in complete silence for several seconds. Everyone was trying to process what they had just witnessed. The man who had been bragging about his fighting skills for the past 15 minutes was now lying flat on his back, gasping like a fish out of water. Marcus's 3 friends rushed forward to help him. Danny kneeled down next to Marcus and tried to help him sit up. Mike and James looked around nervously, unsure of what to do. Marcus, are you okay?" Danny asked in a worried voice. "Can you hear me?" Marcus was finally able to take a small breath. Then another. Slowly, his breathing returned to normal. But he still couldn't speak. His throat felt like it was closed and his head was spinning. Everything around him looked blurry and confused. The watching crowd began to react. Some people started clapping and cheering for Morrison. Others looked shocked and worried about Marcus. A few people were calling for medical help on their phones. Did you see that? One tourist said to his wife. That guard moved like lightning. The other guy never had a chance, another person replied. That was incredible. Marcus tried to sit up but immediately felt dizzy and sick. His back hurt where he had hit the ground. His pride hurt even more. All around him he could hear people talking about what had just happened. I got it all on video, someone shouted excitedly. This is going to go viral. That guy was asking for it, another person said. You don't mess with the Queen's Guard like that. Marcus finally managed to sit up with Danny's help. He looked around at all the faces staring down at him. Some people looked sympathetic. Others looked amused. A few were still recording everything with their phones. Marcus tried to understand what had happened to him. One moment he had been in complete control of the situation. He had been showing off his martial arts skills to a crowd of impressed tourists. The next moment he was on the ground feeling like he had been hit by a truck. He looked up at Morrison, who was standing in exactly the same position as before. The guard showed no signs of having just thrown a grown man through the air. His red jacket was still perfectly clean and pressed. His black hat hadn't moved an inch. Marcus felt confused and embarrassed. In all his years of martial arts training, nothing like this had ever happened to him. He had always been the one throwing other people around. He had always been the winner, the champion, the skilled fighter. Now he was sitting on the pavement in front of Buckingham Palace, surrounded by laughing tourists with camera phones. His expensive clothes were dirty and torn. His confidence was completely shattered. How? Marcus whispered to himself. How did he do that? Danny helped Marcus stand up slowly. Marcus's legs felt weak and shaky. He had to lean on his friend to keep from falling down again. His head was still spinning and he felt sick to his stomach. Marcus looked at Morrison one more time. The guard's blue eyes were still focused straight ahead. His face showed no emotion at all. It was like the entire incident had been as easy as swatting a fly. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus realized that he might not be as tough as he thought he was. The trophy on his kitchen table at home suddenly seemed very small and unimportant. His 15 years of martial arts training felt useless, but Marcus's problems were just beginning. In the distance, he could hear the sound of sirens getting closer. Someone had called the police and security. Soon Marcus would learn that touching a member of the Queen's Guard was a serious crime in England. As Marcus stood there swaying on his feet, he had no idea how much his life was about to change. The viral video that was already being uploaded to social media would follow him forever. His moment of arrogance was about to become his biggest nightmare. Marcus stood on shaky legs, still leaning heavily on his friend Danny for support. His expensive jeans now had a long tear down one side, and his white sneakers were scuffed and dirty. The back of his black jacket was covered in dust and small pieces of gravel from the pavement. The pain in Marcus's back was getting worse as the shock began to wear off. He felt like he had been run over by a car. Every muscle in his body ached and his head was pounding. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional pain he was feeling. Marcus looked around at the crowd of tourists who were still watching him. Many of them were smiling and talking excitedly about what they had just seen. Some were showing their phone videos to friends. A few children were imitating Morrison's throwing motion, pretending to flip their parents. That was amazing. A teenage boy said to his friends, "Did you see how fast that guard moved? It was like something from a movie. The guy in the black jacket never saw it coming," his friend replied. One second he was acting tough and the next second he was flying. Marcus felt his face turn red with embarrassment. These people were talking about him like he was entertainment. Like he was a clown who had just performed a funny trick for their amusement. Morrison continued to stand in his original position, as still as a statue. His blue eyes remained focused on the same distant point. His breathing was calm and steady. The only sign that anything had happened was a tiny wrinkle in his red jacket where Marcus had touched it. Marcus stared at Morrison with a mixture of confusion, anger, and grudging respect. He was trying to figure out how a guard who looked so young and peaceful could move with such devastating speed and skill. "Who is this guy?" Marcus whispered to Danny. "How did he do that to me?" Danny didn't have an answer. Like everyone else in the crowd, he was still shocked by what he had witnessed. In all the years he had known Marcus, he had never seen his friend get beaten so quickly and completely. Sarah, the tour guide, approached Marcus with a worried expression on her face. "Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Marcus shook his head, even though it made his headache worse. "I'm fine," he said in a weak voice. But he clearly wasn't fine. He was hurt, embarrassed, and completely confused about what had just happened to him. "Sir, I need to inform you that the police are on their way," Sarah continued. "When you touched the guard, you committed assault. This is a very serious crime in the United Kingdom." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Assault? But I barely touched him. It was just a little tap." Sarah shook her head. "Any unwanted physical contact with a member of the Queen's Guard is considered assault. The guards are protected by special laws. You could face jail time for this." For the first time since getting thrown to the ground, Marcus felt truly scared. He had come to London for a fun weekend with his friends. He had never imagined that showing off his martial arts skills could lead to criminal charges. "I didn't know," Marcus said weakly. "I thought they were just for show. I didn't think it was illegal to touch his uniform." Mike and James joined Danny in supporting Marcus. All three friends looked worried and scared. They had never been in trouble with the police before, especially not in a foreign country. "Marcus, we need to get you out of here before the police arrive," Mike whispered urgently. "Maybe we can just blend into the crowd and walk away." But it was too late. The sound of sirens was getting louder and closer. Within minutes, 2 police cars and a security van pulled up near the palace gates. 6 officers got out and began walking toward the crowd. The tourists started moving back to give the officers room to work, but many of them continued recording with their phones. Marcus realized that his humiliation was being preserved forever in dozens of videos that would probably be shared all over the internet. A tall police officer with gray hair approached Marcus. His name tag said Constable Williams. He had a stern expression and carried a small notebook. "Are you the individual who assaulted the guard?" Constable Williams asked in a serious voice. Marcus felt trapped. He couldn't deny what had happened because too many people had witnessed it. But he also didn't want to admit to committing a crime. "I didn't assault anyone," Marcus said defensively. "I just touched his jacket. It was barely a tap. I'm a martial artist and I was just trying to get his attention." Constable Williams wrote something in his notebook. "Sir, any physical contact with a member of the Queen's Guard without permission is considered assault under British law. We have multiple witnesses and video evidence of your actions." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. This couldn't be happening. He was supposed to be the hero of this story, not the criminal. He was supposed to be impressing people with his fighting skills, not getting arrested. "But he threw me," Marcus protested, pointing at Morrison. "Look what he did to me. If anyone committed assault, it was him." Constable Williams looked at Marcus like he was crazy. "Sir, the guard was defending himself against your attack. He used appropriate force to neutralize a threat. His actions were completely legal and justified." Another police officer approached Morrison to ask him questions about what had happened. Morrison answered in short, professional sentences. His voice was calm and clear. He described the incident like he was reading from a textbook. "The individual approached me in an aggressive manner," Morrison reported. "He made threatening statements and performed intimidating gestures. When he made physical contact with my uniform, I used standard defensive procedures to neutralize the threat." Marcus listened to Morrison's report with growing anger and frustration. The guard made it sound like Marcus had been a dangerous criminal instead of just an overconfident tourist trying to show off. "That's not what happened," Marcus shouted. "I was just demonstrating my martial arts skills. I wasn't threatening anyone." But as Marcus looked around at the faces of the watching tourists, he realized that his version of events didn't match what everyone else had witnessed. To them, Marcus had looked aggressive and threatening. Morrison had looked professional and controlled. Constable Williams closed his notebook and looked directly at Marcus. "Sir, you are under arrest for assault on a member of the Queen's Guard and for disturbing the peace. You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say may be used as evidence against you in court." Marcus felt the world spinning around him. This was supposed to be the best day of his life. He was supposed to be showing everyone how skilled and impressive he was. Instead, he was being arrested in front of dozens of tourists with camera phones. As the police officer began reading Marcus his full rights, Marcus caught one last glimpse of Morrison. The guard had returned to his duty position and was standing perfectly still once again. His red jacket was clean and pressed. His black hat sat straight on his head. His blue eyes were focused on the same distant point. Morrison looked exactly the same as he had before Marcus had approached him. It was as if the entire incident had been just a minor interruption in his normal routine. But for Marcus, these few minutes had changed everything. As Marcus was led toward the police car with his hands cuffed behind his back, he finally began to understand how wrong he had been about everything. The police car was cold and uncomfortable. Marcus sat in the back seat with his hands cuffed behind him, watching London pass by through the window. His back still hurt from hitting the pavement and his head was pounding. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the fear and embarrassment he felt inside. Danny, Mike, and James followed in a taxi behind the police car. Marcus could see their worried faces through the rear window. His three friends had never been involved with the police before. They had come to London for a fun weekend, and now they were dealing with criminal charges. The police station was a grey brick building in central London. Inside, it smelled like coffee and disinfectant. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the floors were covered with worn linoleum tiles. Everything looked cold and official. Constable Williams led Marcus to a small room with white walls and a metal table. The officer removed Marcus's handcuffs and told him to sit down. Marcus rubbed his wrists where the cuffs had been tight and looked around the room nervously. "Mr. Chen," Constable Williams said, reading from a file, "you are being charged with assault on a member of the Queen's Guard and disturbing the peace. These are serious charges in the United Kingdom." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. What does that mean exactly? What kind of punishment am I looking at? The officer consulted his paperwork. Assault on a royal guard can carry a sentence of up to 6 months in prison and a fine of up to £5,000. Disturbing the peace can add another 3 months and additional fines. Marcus felt like he was going to be sick. 6 months in prison? £5,000? That was more money than he had in his bank account. He thought about his job back in Manchester, his apartment, his car payments. How could a few minutes of showing off lead to such serious consequences? "I want to call a lawyer," Marcus said in a shaky voice. "You can make one phone call," Constable Williams replied. "But I should tell you that we have video evidence from multiple sources. Several tourists recorded the entire incident on their phones. The palace security cameras also captured everything." While Marcus was trying to figure out who to call, the story was already spreading across the internet. The videos that tourists had taken were being uploaded to social media platforms. Within an hour of the incident, clips of Marcus getting thrown by Morrison were being shared thousands of times. The headlines were not kind to Marcus. "Cocky martial artist gets reality check from Royal Guard," read one post. "Tourist learns hard lesson about messing with Queen's Guard," said another. The videos were being shared on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Marcus's martial arts school in Manchester received a phone call from a reporter asking for comments about their students' behavior. Master Kim, Marcus's instructor, was shocked and embarrassed when he saw the video. "This is not what we teach," Master Kim told the reporter. "Martial arts is about discipline, respect, and self-control. Marcus has brought shame to our school and to the art of Taekwondo." Back at the police station, Marcus finally decided to call his older brother David, who was a lawyer in Manchester. David was shocked to receive a call from a London police station. "Marcus, what happened?" David asked. "Are you hurt? Are you in trouble?" Marcus tried to explain the situation, but it sounded even worse when he said it out loud. "I was just demonstrating my fighting skills to some tourists. I barely touched the guard's uniform and he threw me to the ground. Now they're saying I committed assault." David was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, you physically touched a member of the Queen's Guard without permission?" "In front of witnesses, it was just a tiny touch," Marcus protested. "I wasn't trying to hurt him or anything. I was just trying to get his attention." David sighed heavily. "Marcus, those guards are protected by special laws. What you did is considered a serious crime. I'm going to contact a colleague in London who specializes in criminal law. But I have to warn you, this could be very expensive and very serious." While Marcus was dealing with his legal problems, the internet was having a field day with the videos. People were creating memes and jokes about the incident. Some showed Marcus flying through the air with funny captions. Others compared him to cartoon characters getting knocked out. One popular meme showed Marcus approaching Morrison with the caption, "Overconfident black belt." The next frame showed Marcus on the ground with the caption, "Meets real soldier." The meme was shared tens of thousands of times in just a few hours. News websites picked up the story and began reporting on it. The BBC ran a segment called Tourist Arrested After Confronting Royal Guard. Sky News showed the video during their evening broadcast. Even international news outlets began covering the story. Marcus's friends were interviewed by several reporters outside the police station. They tried to defend Marcus, but their explanations didn't sound very convincing. Marcus is usually a really nice guy, Danny told one reporter. He just won a big martial arts competition and I think it went to his head a little bit. He didn't mean any harm. But the video evidence made Marcus look aggressive and threatening. Viewers could see him taunting Morrison, doing intimidating moves, and finally touching the guard's uniform. To most people watching, Marcus appeared to be a bully who got what he deserved. Marcus's employer in Manchester also saw the news coverage. His boss called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. The company was worried about their reputation being associated with Marcus's behavior. "We can't have employees representing our company this way," his boss told the Human Resources Department. "This kind of public embarrassment reflects poorly on all of us." Meanwhile, details about Morrison began to emerge. Reporters discovered that Sergeant James Morrison was a decorated soldier with 10 years of military service. He had served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan and had received several medals for bravery and service. Morrison had trained in multiple forms of combat, including close quarters fighting, weapons handling, and defensive tactics. He was an expert marksman and had completed advanced courses in personal protection and threat assessment. The contrast between Morrison's impressive military record and Marcus's amateur martial arts background made the story even more embarrassing for Marcus. Comments on social media were brutal. "Imagine being so arrogant that you think a few karate classes make you tougher than a combat veteran," one person wrote. "This guy thought he was in a movie, but he found out real life is different," another commented. "Years of training, and he gets taken down in 2 seconds by a real soldier. Maybe he should ask for his money back," read a particularly harsh comment. Back in the police station, Marcus was given a court date and released on bail. His brother David had arranged for a London lawyer to represent him, but the legal fees would be expensive. Marcus would have to return to London in 2 weeks for his court appearance. As Marcus walked out of the police station with his friends, he was immediately surrounded by reporters and cameras. Questions were shouted at him from all directions. "Mr. Chen, what were you thinking when you challenged the guard? Do you regret your actions? What do you want to say to people who saw the video?" Marcus tried to cover his face and push through the crowd, but the cameras followed him. More footage of his humiliation was being captured and would soon be added to the growing collection of videos online. Marcus and his friends finally made it to their hotel, but the damage was already done. The story was everywhere, and Marcus's face was becoming famous for all the wrong reasons. His moment of overconfidence had become a public humiliation that would follow him for the rest of his life. That night, as Marcus lay in his hotel bed with ice packs on his bruises, he began to realize that his problems were just beginning. The legal case was only the start. The real consequences would last much longer than any jail sentence. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood outside Westminster Magistrates' Court in London. His stomach felt sick with nerves and his hands were shaking slightly. He wore his best suit, but it couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. His lawyer, Ms. Sarah Thompson, walked beside him carrying a thick folder of documents. The media attention had not died down. If anything, it had gotten worse. The video of Marcus getting thrown by Morrison had been viewed millions of times across different social media platforms. News outlets from around the world had picked up the story. Marcus had become an internet sensation for all the wrong reasons. "Remember what we discussed," Ms. Thompson said as they climbed the courthouse steps. "Answer only the questions you're asked. Don't try to explain or justify your actions. Show remorse and respect for the court." Inside the courthouse, Marcus saw Morrison for the second time. The guard was dressed in a formal military uniform instead of his red ceremonial jacket. He looked calm and professional as he spoke with the prosecution lawyer. When Morrison glanced at Marcus, his blue eyes showed no emotion at all. The magistrate was an older woman named Judge Patricia Wells. She had gray hair and wore thick glasses. She looked at Marcus sternly as he entered the courtroom. Marcus felt like she could see right through him to all his mistakes and poor decisions. "Mr. Chen," Judge Wells began, "you are charged with assault on a member of the Queen's Guard and disturbing the peace. How do you plead?" Ms. Thompson had advised Marcus to plead guilty to avoid a longer trial and harsher sentence. "Guilty, Your Honor," Marcus said in a quiet voice. Judge Wells nodded and looked at her notes. "Before I pass sentence, I want to understand what led to this incident. Mr. Chen, can you explain your actions on the day in question?" Marcus stood up slowly. His legs felt weak and his voice shook as he spoke. "Your Honor, I had recently won a martial arts competition. I was feeling very confident, maybe too confident. When I saw the guard, I thought he was just for show. I didn't understand that he was a real soldier with real training." "Go on," Judge Wells said. "I started showing off my martial arts skills in front of him. I was trying to impress the tourists and prove that I was a skilled fighter. I know now that my behavior was disrespectful and inappropriate." Judge Wells looked at Morrison. "Sergeant Morrison, can you tell the court about your background and training?" Morrison stood at attention and spoke in a clear, strong voice. "Your Honor, I have served in the British Army for 10 years. I completed 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, where I participated in active combat operations. I have received training in close quarters combat, weapons handling, defensive tactics, and threat assessment. I hold the rank of sergeant and have received commendations for service under fire." Marcus felt smaller and more foolish with every word Morrison spoke. He had challenged a real combat veteran, someone who had faced life-and-death situations in actual wars. Marcus's tournament trophy seemed pathetic in comparison. Judge Wells reviewed some documents. "Sergeant Morrison, in your professional opinion, did Mr. Chen pose a genuine threat to you or to public safety?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "Your Honor, while Mr. Chen's physical actions were relatively minor, his behavior was aggressive and escalating. In my experience, such situations can quickly become dangerous if not controlled. When he made physical contact with my uniform, I followed standard procedures to neutralize the threat." The prosecution lawyer presented evidence to the court. This included multiple video recordings from tourists' phones and security cameras. The videos were played on a large screen for everyone to see. Marcus watched himself on the screen and felt deeply ashamed. He could see how aggressive and arrogant he had looked. He could hear his own voice taunting Morrison and bragging about his fighting skills. He looked like a bully picking on someone who couldn't fight back. When the video showed Morrison's lightning-fast response, gasps came from people in the courtroom gallery. Even knowing what was coming, the speed and skill of the throw was impressive. Marcus remembered the feeling of flying through the air and hitting the pavement. "Your Honor," the prosecution lawyer said, "this case represents a clear example of assault on a member of the Queen's Guard. The defendant's actions were unprovoked, aggressive, and completely inappropriate. The Queen's Guard are protected by special laws because they serve a vital function in our society." Ms. Thompson stood to present Marcus's defense. "Your Honor, while my client's actions were clearly wrong, I ask the court to consider several mitigating factors. Mr. Chen has no prior criminal record. He is employed and has been a productive member of society. His actions, while foolish, were not motivated by malice but by misguided pride following a recent competition victory." Judge Wells listened carefully to both sides. She asked several questions about Marcus's background, his employment, and his understanding of the seriousness of his actions. "Mr. Chen," Judge Wells said, "do you understand why your actions were considered assault under British law?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I understand now that the guards are real soldiers doing an important job. I thought they were just for decoration, but I was completely wrong. I disrespected Sergeant Morrison and the institution he represents." Judge Wells spent several minutes reviewing her notes and the evidence. The courtroom was completely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. "Mr. Chen," Judge Wells finally said, "your actions on that day were foolish, disrespectful, and illegal. You assaulted a member of the Queen's Guard who was simply doing his duty. However, I note that you have no prior criminal record and that you have shown genuine remorse for your actions." Marcus held his breath, waiting for his sentence. "I sentence you to 4 months in prison, suspended for 2 years, provided you complete 200 hours of community service. You will also pay a fine of $3,000 and court costs of $500. Additionally, you are banned from all royal properties for life." Marcus felt relief that he wouldn't go to prison immediately, but the other consequences hit him hard. The fine and court costs would drain his savings. The community service would take months to complete. and the lifetime ban from royal properties meant he could never return to places like Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. But the worst consequences were still to come. As Marcus left the courthouse, he was again surrounded by reporters and cameras. The story of his sentencing would be in newspapers and on websites around the world. Marcus's employer in Manchester had already made a decision. When he returned home, he found a letter waiting for him. The company had decided to terminate his employment due to the negative publicity surrounding his arrest and conviction. Marcus's martial arts school also took action. Master Kim called a meeting with all the black belt students to discuss the incident. "Marcus's behavior goes against everything we teach in martial arts," Master Kim announced. "He has brought shame to our school and to the art of Taekwondo. Effective immediately, Marcus is no longer welcome at this school, and his black belt certification is revoked." The loss of his black belt hit Marcus harder than the criminal conviction. He had worked for 15 years to earn that rank. It had been a huge part of his identity and self-worth. Now it was gone because of a few minutes of stupidity. Word of Marcus's troubles spread quickly through his hometown. Friends and co-workers had seen the viral videos and news coverage. Some people were sympathetic, but many others found the situation amusing or thought Marcus had gotten what he deserved. Marcus discovered that finding a new job was much more difficult than he had expected. Employers would search his name online during the hiring process and find the videos and news articles. Many companies didn't want to hire someone with a criminal record who had become an internet meme. The viral videos continued to haunt Marcus months after the incident. New memes and jokes appeared regularly on social media. People would recognize him on the street and point him out to their friends. Some would even ask him to recreate the incident for their amusement. Marcus began to understand the true difference between his tournament fighting and real-world combat skills. Morrison had years of experience in life-and-death situations. He had been trained by the best military instructors in the world. He had faced armed enemies who were trying to kill him. Marcus, on the other hand, had only fought in controlled tournament environments with rules, referees, and safety equipment. His opponents had been fellow students and amateur competitors, not trained killers or combat veterans. The realization was humbling and painful, but it was also the beginning of Marcus's real education about respect, humility, and the difference between sport and reality. 6 months after the incident at Buckingham Palace, Marcus sat in a small community center in Manchester, helping elderly people learn how to use computers. This was part of his 200 hours of court-ordered community service. His life had changed completely since that terrible day in London. Marcus looked very different now. He had lost weight from stress and poor eating habits. His clothes were cheaper because he had to save money for legal fees and fines. Most importantly, the arrogant confidence that used to define him was completely gone. In its place was a quiet humility that came from hard-earned wisdom. The viral video of his humiliation had over 10 million views across different platforms. It had been turned into countless memes, reaction videos, and compilations. Marcus's face was now permanently associated with overconfidence and getting taught a harsh lesson. The internet never forgot, and neither did the people who recognized him in public. Finding a new job had been much harder than Marcus expected. His criminal record and internet fame made most employers unwilling to hire him. After months of searching, he finally found work at a small warehouse on the outskirts of Manchester. The pay was much less than his previous job, and the work was physically demanding. His social life had also suffered greatly. Many of his old friends felt embarrassed to be seen with him because of his internet notoriety. Dating was nearly impossible because women would recognize him from the viral video. Marcus spent most evenings alone in his small apartment, thinking about how different his life had become. But the changes weren't all negative. The forced isolation gave Marcus time to reflect on his behavior and attitudes. He began reading books about military history and combat training. He wanted to understand what he had really been up against when he challenged Morrison. Marcus learned that the Queen's Guard were elite soldiers, selected from the best regiments in the British Army. They underwent months of specialized training beyond their regular military service. Many of them were combat veterans who had served in dangerous locations around the world. He read about Morrison's regiment and discovered that they had been involved in some of the most intense fighting in Afghanistan. These soldiers had faced suicide bombers, improvised explosive devices, and heavily armed enemy fighters. They had seen friends die and had been forced to make split-second life or death decisions. The more Marcus learned, the more he understood how foolish his challenge had been. He had thought his tournament victories made him a real fighter, but he had never faced genuine danger. He had never had someone trying to actually hurt or kill him. His martial arts training had been a sport, not preparation for real combat. This realization led Marcus to reach out to organizations that supported military veterans. He started volunteering at a local veterans center, helping with administrative tasks and organizing events. At first, the veterans were suspicious of him because they had heard about the incident at Buckingham Palace. But Marcus's genuine remorse and willingness to help slowly won them over. He listened to their stories about military service and combat experiences. He learned about the challenges they faced when returning to civilian life. He began to understand the true meaning of courage, sacrifice, and honor. One veteran named Tom became Marcus's mentor. Tom had served 3 tours in Iraq and had lost a leg to a roadside bomb. Despite his injuries, Tom maintained a positive attitude and worked to help other veterans adjust to civilian life. "The difference between you and us," Tom explained to Marcus one day, "is that we had to learn humility the hard way. We faced situations where our training and experience kept us alive. You learned it in front of a crowd with cameras, which might have been more embarrassing, but at least you lived to learn from it." Marcus also began studying different forms of martial arts with a new perspective. Instead of focusing on winning competitions and impressing people, he approached training as a way to develop discipline and character. He found a small, traditional dojo where the emphasis was on respect, self-control, and personal growth rather than trophies and recognition. The new instructor, an elderly man named Sensei Watanabe, had heard about Marcus's incident, but was willing to give him a second chance. "True martial arts is not about defeating others," Sensei Watanabe taught. "It is about defeating your own ego and weakness." Under this new guidance, Marcus began to rebuild his understanding of martial arts. He learned that the greatest masters were often the most humble people. They used their skills to protect others, not to show off or intimidate. They understood that physical techniques were less important than mental discipline and emotional control. Marcus also started writing about his experiences. He began with a blog where he shared his story and the lessons he had learned. The blog was initially met with ridicule and harsh comments from people who remembered the viral video. But gradually, some readers began to appreciate his honesty and growth. In his writing, Marcus explored the difference between confidence and arrogance. He wrote about how his tournament victories had fed his ego instead of teaching him wisdom. He discussed the importance of respecting others, especially those in service to their country. One of his most popular blog posts was titled, "What I Learned from Being Humbled by a Royal Guard." In it, Marcus wrote, "I thought I was showing strength when I challenged Sergeant Morrison, but I was actually showing weakness. Real strength is the discipline to control yourself, not the ability to control others. Real courage is serving something bigger than yourself, not proving how tough you are to strangers." The blog post was shared thousands of times and helped change some people's perception of Marcus. Instead of just being the guy who got thrown by a royal guard, he began to be seen as someone who had learned from his mistakes and grown as a person. As Marcus completed his community service hours, he reflected on how much his life had changed. He was no longer the arrogant, overconfident person who had stepped off that taxi at Buckingham Palace. The experience had stripped away his false pride and forced him to confront his real character. Marcus realized that losing his job, his reputation, and his old identity had actually been a gift. It had freed him from the pressure to constantly prove himself to others. It had taught him the value of genuine humility and respect. On the day he completed his final hour of community service, Marcus received an unexpected message. It was from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to interview him about his experience. The filmmaker was creating a program about the consequences of social media fame and how viral moments could change people's lives. During the interview, Marcus was asked what he would say to his younger self if he could go back in time. "I would tell him that real strength comes from serving others, not from defeating them," Marcus answered. "I would tell him that true martial arts masters are humble and respectful, not arrogant and boastful. And I would tell him that sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when not to fight." The documentary was well received and helped rehabilitate Marcus's public image somewhat, but more importantly, it gave him a platform to share the lessons he had learned and possibly help others avoid making similar mistakes. 2 years after the incident, Marcus received news that surprised him. Morrison had been promoted to Sergeant Major and was being honored for his continued service. Marcus decided to write a letter to Morrison apologizing for his behavior and thanking him for the lesson he had taught. Marcus never received a reply to his letter, but he didn't expect one. The letter was more for his own closure than for Morrison's benefit. It was a way for Marcus to formally acknowledge his mistakes and express gratitude for the hard lesson that had ultimately made him a better person. Marcus continued working with veterans and writing about personal growth and humility. He never returned to competitive martial arts, but he continued training for personal development. He had learned that the most important opponent he would ever face was his own ego, and that was a battle that required constant vigilance. The viral video would always be part of his story, but Marcus had learned to see it differently. Instead of a moment of humiliation, he now viewed it as the beginning of his real education about life, respect, and what it truly meant to be strong.